Hello everyone, welcome back to Huntcraft. What if I told you that you can have a slate with flechette and a silencer for 85% cheaper? Let me explain. Here's the slate firing 6 rounds as fast as possible. Remember, the slate does not have flechettes. And here's the bow firing 6 arrows as fast as possible. Nearly the same fire rate, right? So we have that, but on top of it, like I said, it's 85% cheaper, it's silenced, it's got reusable ammo, and it's a medium-sized weapon, not a large size. Sounds like a pretty good deal to me. That's why this video is going to be about one of my favorite weapons in the game, the bow. In this video, I'm going to try to showcase and analyze the bow, and it's kind of hard to make an analysis like other gun comparisons, because frankly, nothing really compares to it. It's its own category. The only weapon that can have a foot in the door in this category would be the crossbow. And if you want a deep dive in that weapon, please check out my previous video analyzing the crossbow. Let's look at the basics for the weapon. I'm going to try to be thorough and cover all the info I can so that this guide can hopefully be helpful to everyone across all skill and experience levels. Alright, so the bow is a medium-sized weapon. It's pretty cheap, only $57, and it's silent. Its base arrow travels at 150 meters per second, and arrow drop starts at 20 meters, and it's a little bit wobbly when you ADS. Obviously, it's a medium-sized weapon, so the ADS is not as good as large slot weapons. The bow will one-shot to the body at up to 25 meters. And it will headshot from any range. The bow shares the unique aspect with the crossbow where they're the only weapons in the game that have projectile drop. In Hunt, no bullet has any drop component. The bow is unique that way, and that's the main part that makes it probably the most difficult weapon to master in the game. Coupled with the slow arrow speed and early projectile drop after 20 meters, this is the main source of difficulty. But we can counter that. That is not something that should stop you from learning the bow, because if you use it for its main strength, which is CQC, then you can just treat it as a shotgun and just not bother with leading. Range can obviously be covered by your choice of loadout, whatever your second gun is. I'm not going to be recommending a loadout of running 2 bows or anything like that. Arrow hits will also cause bleeding, And according to the tooltip, it's supposed to be medium bleed, which should be 3 damage per second. That's just not true. Just for the sake of completion and that this is a guide, let me quickly explain how bleeding works in the game. There's 3 stages of bleeding, and they are characterized by both the damage per second and how long it takes to stop the bleeding. And it's easy to tell if you're hit which one it is. Here are the differences. Light bleed takes 2 seconds to stop, indicated by 1 blood drop on your health bar, and it does 1.5 damage per second. Medium bleed takes 4 seconds to stop, and it's indicated by 2 blood drops on your health bar, and it does 3 DPS. Intense or heavy bleed takes 6 seconds to stop, and it's indicated by 3 blood drops on your health bar, and it does 4.5 DPS. And generally, bleeding escalates to the next level with consecutive rending attacks. See, we know heavy bleeding is 4.5 damage per second, and this is ticking 9 damage every 2 seconds. So that's heavy. Here's a comparison with Dum Dum on a Springfield, which causes severe bleeding. Same rate. And a Frag Bomb too, which causes intense bleeding. Same rate. Also, knowing that multiple hits on a bleeding target will cause the bleeding to intensify. For example, here it's ticking at 6, which is 3 DPS. With another hit, it goes up to 9, which is 4.5 DPS. So if there's any heavier bleed, it would go up to it. Here's 2 shots with a bow, and it's still at 9. And we can also see that it causes heavy bleed no matter what the distance or the body part it hits. You can see at 100 meters, literally hitting the toe, and it's still ticking at 9 or 10. Now, all of that was full draw, as one of the aspects of the bow is that the damage will increase the longer you draw. You can see here, if you just flick, it does less than 150, but when you draw just a little bit longer, it does more. Also, the longer you draw, the further the arrow will travel. Another property of the bow is arrow pull damage. Because you can retrieve your arrows, when you hit someone, you can go and pull your arrow from their body, and that will do more damage. You can see here, it seems to do 35 damage to the lower body, all the way up to the waist, and then anything above the waist, including the arms and shoulders, it's a flat 50. Even though the bow will one-shot to the head at any range, this isn't as sexy as it sounds, because once the arrow starts to drop, you will have to aim higher and higher. You can see here, once we go further than 35 meters, I have to aim above the head to get a headshot. And add to that a moving target, and it gets a bit harder to land. Now for the drop-off range, arrow damage starts to drop off after 25 meters. So I'm quickly charting the rest of the ranges up to 100 meters, which I think is already out of the reasonable range of using the bow. I'm here hitting the upper body with full draw, and I'm not using the trait 100 hands. And as you can see, it's pretty linear. This does seem pretty uniform, which means the bow sustains pretty good damage at longer ranges. This is different from most other guns, which tend to have multiple sharp bends in their drop-off charts. I guess this counters the difficulty of having to lead your shots and account for arrow drop, unlike the rest of the guns in the game. The bow's fire rate is fairly reliable at all times, like we've seen earlier. There's no big difference here between reload time and cycle time. You simply need to account for the redraw animation and try to pull as much as you can to increase your damage. Now let's talk about traits. The bow benefits from 2 traits. The first one is Blade Seer, which will allow you to see throwing knives, throwing axes, and your arrows highlighted in dark sight. This is a cool trait when you're still getting familiar with the bow and you don't want to lose your arrows, but with time you'll realize it's not worth a trait slot. I never pick it now. The main trait that you always want to pick is 100 Hands. This trait will allow you to do 10% more damage at full draw and will improve your idle sway at full draw, but it will slow your draw a little bit. 100 Hands will also allow you to melee with the arrow in hand with heavy attacks. This will actually one-shot to the head and deal 105 damage to the chest. This will not cause a bleed. One more fun tip here. With a full draw, even at point blank range, you cannot one-shot to the arm. But with 100 Hands, which will give you 10% more damage, that's 140 plus 14, so more than 150. At full draw, this close, you can one-shot to the arm or the hands. Check this out. This team banished the boss and were clearly camping. I noticed this little rat with his bomb lance, then a full draw to the elbow, and his camping days are over. So to summarize all that in a pros and cons bullet points type of list, the bow is cheap, generous one-shot range to the torso and head, silent, has reusable ammo, good fire rate, applies the heaviest bleed, medium-sized, very good for AI and bosses, so it will cover your choice of tools as well. And on the negative side, it's not very good for long range. It has slow velocity, so it's hard to lead your shots. Couple that with the arrow drop, so it's difficult to learn. And it lacks any form of penetration for most surfaces. Now, those are all the basics for the bow. Let's talk a little bit about tips or strategy in your gameplay. Because the bow is unique, it also mandates some habits that you should learn in your gameplay. From what we've discussed, you always want to draw your bow as much as you can, which means you want to minimize quick flicks. Now here's the difference. Sometimes you will have to flick. For example, if you're trying to catch a player that is running away and they're a frame away from getting behind cover, then you want to release your arrow as fast as you can. So that at least if they don't die and get into cover, they're not comfy. They're under the pressure of bleeding, and then you have the advantage of following up. On the other hand, you're a bit vulnerable when you're drawing because it's effectively downtime. So you want to get into the habit of drawing when you're in cover, then peek and shoot. And with every shot, especially if the enemy is close, you need to always have your exit plan after the shot. So you shoot and run right away. Kind of like what you have to do with the crossbow, but it's probably more necessary for the crossbow because of its punishing reload time. But still, a good habit to get into because you want the safe distance to afford the time to redraw your bow. You can see in this example, I'm holding the angle, then as soon as I shoot, I dip out. I got the kill and I escaped their shot so I can redraw and peek again, and again, I dip out as soon as I shoot. Again here, I hear them behind the wall. I didn't know there too. I hit one of them and instantly dip out, pull again, and as I peek back in, I hit the second one and dip out again. It's also worth noting that it's a good habit to always hip fire with a bow. The main reason you would ever ADS is if you're trying to land a longer range shot, so you want a bit more convenience with the zoom and ease of adjusting and maybe crouch to stabilize the wobbling. Here, for example, I hip fire this guy. Even though he hit me, he clearly ran away because of the bleed, so I can follow up and another hip fire and he's dead. And for this one, I can ADS to get more precision. Now, one of the most atrocious things about Hunt is the damn trade window. And playing the bow, you will unfortunately be subject to it pretty often. I guess it's due to the slow arrow speed. It pushes the limit of those 800 milliseconds Crytek imposed on us. Two of those clowns are running Terminus with levering and dragon breath. Who the hell made a video recommending that? That delay, man. This will happen if you're playing the bow or against it too. Look at that damn delay. One last tip, which I guess is more for when you're against a bow. This guy hit me with Dum Dum, which should give you some confidence to push, but you just don't push a bow with a freaking pistol. And on the funny side, you can get kills even when you're flashed. One tick of bleeding and he's dead. Freaking Daredevil stuff. Now let's talk about special ammo. The bow has a versatile variety of arrows. Worth noting that all types of ammo for the bow, including the base arrows, are special ammo, so you can never restock from normal ammo boxes. That's why it's a necessary habit to remember to retrieve your arrows and not be overly generous with your shots, because 2 of the 4 types of ammo cannot even be retrieved. So the first one we have is Concertina arrows, which basically creates a Concertina explosion. Concertina arrows do less damage on impact, they start dropping off at 50% earlier, their spread is worse than the normal arrow, and they're nearly half the speed. This is mainly useful for blocking areas or finishing off a runner with a lob, or stun locking an enemy like this. This guy was under pressure from my teammate, and at the same time I'm covering him with Concertina. He even tries to close the door. This one is an easy 2-shot because the first arrow was actually a body hit, which does initial damage. This guy never came out of the corner. I think he stayed there reloading and hoping his teammate would jump in and engage me, so I thought I'd pin him down in the corner. You get 4 arrows per ammo slot, and you cannot retrieve those. On top of that, it's a flimsy Concertina, as you can see. If you walk all over it, you still never get past medium bleed. And it can be easily removed with dynamite, obviously, or even a couple of whacks from an axe. Worth noting that this is still an arrow, so it can actually one-shot to the head, with a bit of extreme leading. It just has a more punishing arrow drop component because of its slower velocity. The next one is poison arrows. Those are basically arrows with extra benefit of applying poison, at the cost of having a little bit worse hipfire spread, and you get fewer arrows per slot. They can still be pulled from the target, so you can retrieve them. They have the same speed and drop properties as normal arrows, and they apply the same heavy bleed. Next one is frag arrows. You also get 4 of those per ammo slot, and obviously they deliver an explosion, so you cannot retrieve them. Frag arrows can never one-shot. They do 111 damage max on explosion, and the explosion, like frag bombs, will apply a heavy bleed. As you can see, they're also slower, so you have to aim higher to reach further distances. They also do not stick to anything, which helps with lobbing them through windows or bouncing them against walls a little bit. Funny enough, the explosion is a little bit delayed, but they do damage on impact. Check this out. This guy was just revived, so he was very low. And as you can see, he just died to the impact, not the explosion. So you can see here the impact deals 25 damage no matter what distance or what body part it hits. But that's still 25 plus 111. So it's 136 and it will still not one shot. The damage radius of the frag arrows seems to be the same as explosive bolts from the crossbow, which is about 6 meters. This one is a good example for both lobbing through a window and a body hit. So you can see here, I got a hit marker for the body hit and the explosion, which means 25 damage plus 111. That means he has 14 health left. While it's ticking at 4.5 per second, that's roughly 3 seconds to stop the bleeding. He obviously ran downstairs and died downstairs. Here, I killed that guy once already, so he is at a maximum of 125 health. That means a player who's lost even a small bar will be one shot by a body hit and an explosion. Same exact scenario here. The use of frags can be categorized into 3 categories. The first one is to get an initial hit with anything and then follow up with a frag that can get the target even if they're behind cover. It's also a good bonus if the initial hit can cause them to bleed, which means you can just listen to the bleeding and your follow-up shot can just be in the range of where you hear them. For example, this one, I hit the guy with Dum Dum from a Springfield, which is a severe bleed. So he's immediately running behind the building to get cover, then he can stop the bleed. But then if I aim high enough, I can get the lob, and that's a kill. Even Pitcher with an explosive would not reach that far. Here I hit this guy with Dum Dum, so he started bleeding, but then he missed his initial reactive shot, which means he's under more pressure to either shoot again or quickly run to cover to stop the bleed, so it gave me time to delay my shot so that it puts more pressure on him, and that's a kill. The second category is to open up with a frag. It applies the heavy bleed, which creates huge pressure. Then you can follow up with anything. Here, for example, as soon as I get a hit marker from the explosion, I immediately switch to my normal arrows and jump down to follow up, and I can clearly hear the bleeding, so I know he's here. And that's a kill. This guy here, for example, trades hits with me, so he knows he got me, but he's also bleeding. So he gambles on the ego challenge, but I'm holding the angle, so it's an easy kill. This one is pretty standard, and again, the sound of the bleeding makes it very easy to track where the player is. Coupled with the really good fire rate of hip fire from the marathon, makes it really easy to follow up and get this kill. Again here, the marathon is a really good companion for the bow. And obviously, the third category would be to also follow up with another frag. For example here, I hear this guy inside that little building. I don't need to see him, but then I get the hit. I hear him go below. And again, I don't need to see him. Another frag and he's dead. This works in panic moments as well. I got a hit with the first frag, so this guy is now bleeding. I know he has a shotgun, so he has to close the gap and gamble on the ego challenge. I peek, shoot, and dip out, and he's dead. This guy was too close as well, and he traded hits with me with a shotgun. He desperately tried to risk the push. Another frag, and I dip out, means he dies to the explosion while I'm safe in cover. And then the classic botty necro with no consideration. Now I know this guy's here. I open the door, and I know he hears the door, so he will probably be looking my way. I hold the angle. I get a body hit, so he gets the explosion and the body hit. That means he has 3 seconds to live, and he had no chance. Just by listening, I know this guy's close enough. And I get a hit with the explosion. I can hear the bleed in the corner, so it's worth peeking even if I burn. I get a double hit, so one is dead and the other is bleeding. Pretty bad shot because I was worried about the fire. And the second one finishes him off. Now back to 100 hands, the trait. The melee component you get with it only works with base and poison arrows. As you can see here, the frag and concertina arrows will not let you melee with a pointy end. Also worth noting that while normal arrows do not cause a bleed with a melee attack, it seems like the melee with the poison arrows does apply poison. You can hear the sound effect of the poison effect, which sounds like a heavy heartbeat. I think that's all the info I can think of for the bow. I hope you found this long video worth it, and I hope it had something here or there that you might have not known. And if you're new to hunt, or the bow specifically, I encourage you to try it. I don't think it's worth suggesting a specific loadout, because the bow is pretty versatile for the range of situations it covers. And the fact that it gives you flexibility with tool selection as well, you basically need to run whatever you prefer from mid to long ranges. I personally run the guns I already favor, like the Lamap carbine, or the Marathon, or the Officer carbine. Nothing wrong with an uppercut, or an uppercut precision, etc., so you're free. I have a bunch of games for commentary, but this video has already dragged for too long, so I'll upload the commentary separately later.
Nice shot.
Hopefully Hunt picks up more players in the near future, given the news about the new engine coming on the 15th of August, and the new map as well. Let's hope for a solution for the damn trade window, cheaters, cross-region play, ping abusers. There's quite a lot to fix for Crytek, and if the new engine is the excuse to get those things sorted, then the clock is ticking. So let's be optimistic. Or delusional, I don't know. Anyway, please remember to like and subscribe and comment. See you in the next one.